Welcome back to the Movie Man. Today I will show you a 2011 action thriller web series, Terra. Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The series starts in the year 2149, when the Earth's ability to support life is reaching its end as oxygen is depleting day by day due to overdevelopment. People are having difficulties breathing, so they are forced to wear specialized masks. Moreover, the world has become so polluted that the plants can no longer grow and fruits are considered rare. To keep things strictly under control, a military-like law enforcement system has been imposed. They have adopted a two-child policy to combat the overpopulation issue. On the other hand, the scientists have also achieved a breakthrough. They have discovered a tear in the fabric of space-time which leads them to Terra Nova, the prehistoric Earth of 85 million years ago. In other words, the scientists have found a time portal that can teleport them to the Cretaceous period where the world is still green and dinosaurs are still active. At the start of the series, Jim Shannon, a cop by profession, enters his residence wearing a rebreather, which is an oxygen mask to support airflow. Jim lives with his wife Elizabeth, a medical officer, and 3 children, Josh, Maddie, and Zoe. In this way, despite being a cop himself, he has violated the two-child policy. Soon he takes out an orange from his bag and the entire family is very surprised since fruit and vegetables are in short supply. Maddie suddenly enters the apartment and warns them that she saw the population control police in the lobby. This alarmed the parents and they quickly hide little Zoe in an air vent. Shortly after, the police come in and start rummaging through the place. It appears as if someone informed them about the 3rd child. At least if they find her, her final memory will be going nuts with that orange. They search everywhere but fail to find the little girl. However, just as they're about to leave, a scared Zoe whimpers from the vent and gets discovered. Devastated, Jim begs the cops to release his daughter and even starts fighting them. However, he is easily outnumbered and taken into custody himself. For his offense, he's handed over an 8-year sentence. 2 years later, Elizabeth tips off a prison guard and finally manages to visit her husband. Jim is sick in his cell due to poor air quality and the lack of a rebreather. As the two reconcile, Elizabeth reveals that she has been given a position as a medical officer in the 10th pilgrimage, but she is not allowed to take Zoe. The 10th pilgrimage is the 10th group of human colonists who will be allowed to travel to Terra Nova, where they can start a new life. Before leaving, she tells Jim that he is their last hope and sneaks in a rebreather. After a while, Jim checks the rebreather and finds a hidden laser knife inside. In the next scene, Elizabeth, Maddie, and Josh check in, go through security, and head towards the time portal. On the other hand, Jim manages to get out of the prison with the help of the laser knife and arrives at the check-in area. He slides into a restricted room where he pays a large amount of money in exchange for a certain bag. Unfortunately, the officers notice him on camera breaching the restricted area. By this time, Elizabeth and the children have already walked in through the portal, but when Jim tries to follow them, an officer stops him. Since the time portal is irreversible, anyone who reaches Terra Nova cannot return. Jim knows about this, so he elbows the officer, steals his gun, and runs into the portal to follow his family. As soon as he enters the portal, he reaches the prehistoric Earth, which is completely different from the world they just left. Jim finally reunites with his family, but when a soldier notices the weapon in his hand, he is held at gunpoint. The soldier then checks the suspicious bag that Jim is carrying. Surprisingly, little Zoe comes out of it. Seeing the entire family together, the soldiers leave them be. What you're doing is all kinds of illegal, but you made it to Dinosaur World, so have a good day. Later, as the group proceeds towards Terra Nova, little Zoe comments on the sky. She notes that she had never seen the clouds so wide and the trees so green. After entering Terra Nova for the first time, the travelers of the 10th pilgrimage are greeted by Commander Nathaniel Taylor, one of the first people to enter the travel portal. He gives a short introduction of the place and assures that everyone is going to have a better life from today onwards, so long as they don't get their asses ripped off by dinosaurs. Following this, he confronts Jim and Elizabeth and berates them for breaking the law. However, when the couple pleads for a fresh start, he lets them keep their 3 children. Jim wants to stay a cop in Terra Nova as well, but given his history, Taylor assigns him to the agricultural department. Next, the family settles into their new home. Maddie and Zoe fight for their new rooms, while their parents contemplate if they made the right decision by coming to Terra Nova. As everyone is busy moving their belongings, they notice that Zoe has wandered off. Outside, a curious Zoe approaches a brachiosaur, a dinosaur species, and feeds it with some fern. Surprisingly, the giant herbivore accepts it, which makes the little girl very happy. The following day, Josh and Maddie head towards an orientation meeting where they meet a fellow resident Sky and her friends Tasha, Max and Hunter. After the introductions, Josh decides to explore Terra Nova with Sky while Maddie prefers to learn about their new home by attending the orientation meeting. Shortly after, Sky and her friends take Josh into the jungle. They arrive at a beautiful waterfall and jump into it. Near the waterfall, Sky shows Josh some rocks where golden colored symbols are carved into them. Since Taylor has forbidden anyone to visit this area, Sky makes Josh promise to keep the stones a secret. Elsewhere in the medical sector, Elizabeth attends to a patient surrounded by officers. She wonders why the patient needs security, and one of the officers informs her that he is a Sixers member. Sixers appear to be a group of rebels who have separated themselves from Terra Nova. Their main goal is to overthrow Commander Taylor and rob the main colony of all its resources. Suddenly the patient jumps from his bed and threatens to kill Elizabeth with a laser knife. After using her as a hostage and forcing the officers to disarm, the man flees. Outside, Jim notices the man acting suspicious and follows him. Soon enough, the man attempts to attack Taylor, but Jim successfully stops him. Jim knows that there is more than a mere paradise in Terra Nova, so he demands Taylor explain about the man and why he was trying to kill him. However, with everyone around, the latter insists Jim get in his vehicle for a ride. After the two reach the same waterfall from before, Taylor starts explaining about the Sixers. He reveals that the Sixers came from the Sixth Pilgrimage with a secret supply of weapons. However, he doesn't know why the group wants to overthrow him. Taylor then commends Jim on his bravery and offers him to join Terra Nova's security forces. As the two continue chatting, they notice a group of Sixers heading toward their colony. Wasting no time, they begin pursuing the Sixers but realize that they are actually fleeing from two Carnotaurus, a species of carnivorous dinosaurs. Taylor and his group somehow manage to repel the dinosaurs, but they still have to deal with their archenemies. Myra, the leader of the Sixers, comes out of her vehicle along with the others and starts talking. She reveals that she is there to negotiate the release of Carter, the same guy who tried to kill Taylor earlier. She then brings forth a large box of meteoric iron, an extremely rare element, and proposes to trade it for Carter. Realizing that the element is too valuable to give up on, Taylor agrees to the terms and releases Carter. Elsewhere in the jungle, Josh, Sky and the other friends start making booze from wild fruits. While they are enjoying themselves, they hear a loud roar. Sky explains it's an axoraptor known as the Slasher. It is a dinosaur species with colorful feathers and a whip-like bladed tail capable of cutting a man in half, but she assures Josh not to fear, as slashers mostly hunt at night. Suddenly they hear an even louder howl, so they decide to return to their vehicle. However, they are seen spotted by a couple of deadly slashers. The group somehow manages to take refuge in an armored vehicle abandoned by the Sixers, but by this time several slashers have surrounded them. In the attack, Tasha, Max and Hunter get seriously injured. Back in the colony, Terra Nova's security finds footage of the teenagers sneaking away. Fearing the worst, Jim, Elizabeth and some soldiers head to the forest to rescue the children. Fortunately, they find the group in the nick of time and scare away the dinosaurs using some advanced machinery. Following the close call, they head back to Terra Nova. Later, Sky visits Taylor and his residence and apologizes for initiating the trip. During their conversation, we realize that Sky is an orphan whose dad served under Taylor. Both of her parents were taken away by fever some years back. One day, a group of Terra Nova soldiers goes out into the woods to get some supplies. However, they are attacked and brutally killed by some unseen creatures. In the meantime, Josh, Maddie and Zoe attend a survival seminar taught by Lieutenant Alicia Washington, the second in command to Taylor. Maddie is a smart kid and she eagerly answers most of the questions asked by the lieutenant. Later that night, when Jim and Elizabeth start getting intimate, a creature starts screaming, so Jim goes outside to inspect. It is the same unseen animal that attacked the soldiers earlier, but Jim doesn't know this, so he simply scares it away. The following day, Taylor and Jim plan to search for the missing man, thinking it was the Sixers that attacked them. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is working in the medical sector when she bumps into Malcolm Wallace, one of her good friends from college. Malcolm tells her that he is a science officer there. That sound made up Malcolm. Just then, Jim walks in and interrupts their conversation. Elizabeth quickly introduces the two to each other, but when Malcolm learns that Jim is her husband, he is taken aback. In the next scene, Jim along with Taylor and the crew head out to the woods. While driving, Taylor asks Jim to investigate who is giving Myra information about Terra Nova. He believes that there's a mole within the colony. The group then arrives at the murder spot. When they see the dead soldiers, they notice that their faces have been disfigured. After a bit of checking around, they bring the dead bodies back to Terra Nova, and the medical team led by Elizabeth and Malcolm starts examining them. Elizabeth deduces that the soldiers were attacked from above. Just then Jim, who is also in the lab, notices a claw-like piece on one of the corpses. With this clue, the medical officers decide to stay late to find out what creature could have killed the man. However, even after hours of research, they don't find any specimen that matches the mysterious claw. When Elizabeth returns home, Jim asks her about Malcolm. After he presses the issue, she finally tells him that she dated Malcolm for a while before breaking it off herself, probably after learning that there's no such thing as a science officer. Later that night, the couple attempts intimacy once again, but to their bad luck they are again interrupted by the same creature. This time Josh joins his father outside and they notice several of the same creatures there. Josh tries scaring them away with a rock but only ends up making them angry. They swarm over the father-son duo like a deadly rash, but before any serious injury is caused, Josh and Jim make it inside the house. The next day Malcolm examines Jim's injuries from the creatures and realizes that they're the same ones that killed the man. After treating the injuries, a curious Jim asks Taylor about Malcolm and learns that he was the one who requested Elizabeth's survival on Terra Nova. Outside, Sky and Josh are roaming around the market when they notice a large flock of the same birds, but before they could warn the others, the birds start attacking everyone. They leave the place after a few minutes, but by this time several residents are seriously injured. Meanwhile, Malcolm recovers one of the dead birds and concludes that they are an unknown type of pterosaur, a species of flying reptile. In a meeting with Taylor and his crew, Malcolm deduces that the pterosaurs may be migrating. Taylor reveals that years ago he and Lieutenant Alicia had discovered thousands of eggshells while digging the ground on which Terra Nova sits today, but since they were already hatched, the officers thought the creatures had long since moved on. Additionally, the shells made the ground so fertile that they decided to make the settlement in this location. Hearing this, Malcolm concludes that the pterosaurs are attacking them because Terra Nova sits upon their breeding grounds. Since the medical officers did not know much about the new species, Malcolm and Elizabeth tell Taylor that they will need a live male and female specimen of the pterosaurs to try to come up with a solution to defend against them. Next, Jim prepares to head out of the colony to get the specimens while Malcolm details him about the species. However, instead of listening, Jim confronts him for still being in love with his wife, as he was the one who requested her presence in Terra Nova. This shocks Malcolm and he defends himself by saying that he called Elizabeth as she is the best medical officer he has ever known. A while later, Jim returns with the two said specimens. After studying the creatures, Malcolm and Elizabeth discover that they can produce an extremely powerful pheromone that could be used to lure all of the pterosaurs away from the colony and to another location where they can breed. As more pterosaurs continue to arrive at the settlement, Taylor orders the security team members to be stationed all around the colony. Mark Reynolds, a young soldier who evidently has a crush on Maddie, comes to her home for security. On the other hand, also brings Sky to keep her safe from the creatures. Soon after, a giant swarm of pterosaurs invades the settlement and starts wreaking havoc. A few of them force their way into Jim's house via the air duct. Mark, being a soldier, tries to scare them away but only ends up getting his ass knocked out. Despite this, Josh and the group fight valiantly and hold off the creatures long enough to lock themselves in another room. Elsewhere at the medical lab, Elizabeth and Malcolm finally finished preparing the pheromones. Now all they have to do is lure the pterosaurs away. The commander, Taylor, decides to volunteer and Jim also joins him. Soon the two gear up and leave in a vehicle which starts spraying the pheromone. Surprisingly, the plan works, and despite Taylor and Jim receiving some minor cuts, they manage to lure the entire swarm of pterosaurs away from Terra Nova. All the residents come out of their homes and resume their normal lives again. Dr. Jonathan Gwagendi, a researcher and outpost, he plays with a green beetle. The beetle leads him outside the room where Jonathan sees wildlife. Before he can take a look at the flowers, a Carnotaurus arrives at the scene and opens his jaws, devouring Jonathan. In the next scene, Elizabeth, Taylor and one of his soldiers, Brady, leave in a rover to investigate what's going on at Outpost 3 since no one there is responding to communications attempts. They arrive at the outpost and see the gate is open when it shouldn't be, and Taylor notices chewed cables. He deduces that ovisaurs, a species of dinosaurs, probably did that to the cables. Inside the research lab, they see signs saying do not go outside and this is not a dream. They hear noises and go into a room to find two people lying down on beds while a woman arrives at the door in front of them. The woman states that the last thing she remembers is running around in snow up to her knees and then being in the lab. She doesn't seem to know that she's in Terra Nova. Elizabeth and Taylor then discover a video in the main lab where Dr. Jonathan is talking about the early stages of memory loss. Elizabeth finds some research papers and finds out that Dr. Jonathan was working on genetic memory manipulation to cure diseases like Alzheimer's and created a virus to disperse it. Since they could have also been exposed to the virus, Taylor wants them to stay quarantined until they can figure out a solution. Back at home, Zoe comes in sick from school while Maddie is having her first date with Mark. At the outpost, Taylor finds Dr. Jonathan almost entirely eaten by the Carnotaurus. Elizabeth briefs the situation to Jim in a video. Jim mentions that Zoe is sick and she realizes Jim also has a cold. For the next couple of days, Jim cannot communicate with Elizabeth due to a communication problem in the outpost. Anxious, he goes to the commander's base and asks Lieutenant Alicia about it. He learns that the place is under quarantine and she too hasn't been able to contact Taylor. Learning this, Jim wants to go check out himself, but the lieutenant informs him to stay, but he leaves anyway. Jim informs the situation to Malcolm, but he decides that they are going to save Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Josh and Sky share a kiss, but Josh immediately pulls away, saying that although he likes her, he still thinks about his girlfriend Kara, who is in 2149. Seeing him upset, Sky tells him she could help him get Kara to Terra Nova. In the following scene, Malcolm and Jim arrive at Outpost 3, where they find that Ovasaurs have been chewing the communication wires again. Once inside, they find Elizabeth, but she is pointing a rifle at them. Jim takes off his helmet to show who he is, but she still forces him down. When Malcolm takes off his helmet, she starts crying out of happiness. She hugs him, confusing Jim. After conversing for a while, Malcolm realizes that Elizabeth's lost 20 years of her memory and thinks she's in medical school again and just started dating Malcolm. He tells Jim that she'll start losing more of her memory and might eventually die. At home again, Sky takes Josh to Tom Boylan, a bartender. Boylan says he can get people to Terra Nova as he's done in the past, but needs an expensive trade. At the outpost, Jim finds a video of Elizabeth talking about what's going on to her. Being in Outpost 3 in case she too loses memory, and shows it to Elizabeth. She finally understands the situation when Jim hears a noise. He follows it and finds an unconscious Brady. Just then, Taylor jumps from the roof above and threatens to shoot Jim. It turns out that Taylor has also lost his memory and thinks he is in the war in Somalia. He threatens to slit every throat inside if he can't find his wife and son before knocking out Jim. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and Malcolm examine blood samples, and Malcolm also starts showing symptoms of memory loss. Jim arrives at the scene and informs them that Taylor's going back to the colony because he thinks he's in a war from his past. Malcolm and Jim then carry an unconscious Brady to the truck when Malcolm goes through another amnesia phase. He doesn't understand anything at all. Jim gets annoyed by it and punches Malcolm, knocking him out. In the meantime, Taylor arrives at the Terra Nova gates and punches a guard to get to the commander's base. While examining, Elizabeth notices that Jim hasn't had any symptoms lately, as he too should have been infected by now. When Jim sneezes, she realizes that his cold symptoms are blocking the virus from entering his body. Back at the colony, Maddie worries about her parents, and together with Mark she marches to the base to speak to Lieutenant Alicia and own to them. Taylor has already infiltrated the base and grabs Mark from behind, putting a knife to his throat. Lieutenant Alicia tells Taylor he's sick and there is no war anymore. She convinces him she and Mark are his soldiers and that Terra Nova is home. Taylor then slowly moves away from the knife, and the lieutenant manages to get a hold of him with her sonic gun. At the outpost, Elizabeth thinks distributing the cold virus can offset the memory loss virus. She thinks of different scientific methods of sharing the cold virus, but Jim kisses her, transferring his virus to her. In the next scene, Commander Taylor wakes up on a bed and Elizabeth asks him if he knows where he is. He looks around and decides he's in Terra Nova. Elizabeth tells him that she managed to create a vaccine and the rest of the team are now safe. Elsewhere in the woods, Boylan the bartender trades some medical supplies and power cells with Myra and the Sixers. It turns out he is the Sixers spy that Taylor and Jim are after. Boylan tells Myra about his deal with Josh after realizing it's the cop's son. Myra is pleased since she can take this as an opportunity to get back to Taylor through Josh and Jim. In the following scene, Lieutenant Alicia leads a team to the woods after suspecting an intruder nearby. They find a little girl and take her to the medical sector. After her vitals are checked, she identifies herself as Lee, who has been living with the Sixers, and says that she was trying to find the portal as she wants to return to her grandma's in 2149. Jim tells her that the portal only works one way, meaning people can only come in but cannot go out. The girl then tells the others that she lost her bag in the jungle. Thinking there could be something important in the bag, Taylor sends Lieutenant Alicia to look for the bag. Meanwhile, Jim and his family take Lean to live in their house temporarily. While the lieutenant and her team are out looking for the little girl's pack, they are attacked by Sixers. Myra and her men hold them captive after a small fight. She then arrives at the gates of Terra Nova and meets with Taylor. Myra says she will let go of Taylor's people if he agrees to let Lee return to the Sixers. Taylor suggests that they let the little girl decide for herself instead, and Myra agrees. When Lee decides to stay at the colony, Myra reluctantly frees the lieutenant and her team. The following day, a couple reports to Jim and Taylor that someone broke into their house and exposed a new empty hidden compartment beneath the floor. When the lieutenant reveals that the house of the couple used to be Myra's, the security team immediately searches for Lee, who is now trying to run away from the colony with a strange box retrieved from the house. Thankfully, Jim finds Lee and takes her into custody. It turns out that it was Myra's plot to retrieve the mysterious box. Lee reveals that she was following Myra's orders to obtain the box because Myra threatened to harm her brother Sam. Taylor and the team try to open the box, but to no avail. Next, Jim heads out to find the Sixers camp and rescue Sam, but instead steps into a booby trap. Sixers then arrive at the scene and take him to their camp. There, Myra reveals Sam was never in danger, she just had to lie to Lee to force her into doing whatever she asked of her. Myra also tells that someone in 2149 is indirectly controlling her actions since they have her daughter, Sienna, captive. They also want to overthrow Taylor. When Jim asks who they are, she doesn't reply. Instead, she suggests Jim join the Sixers because he is on the wrong side. She vaguely tells Jim that Terra Nova was not really established to give humanity a chance to start over. Myra then decides to let Jim go along with Sam. Jim and Sam arrive back at the colony and Lee is overjoyed to reunite with her brother. Later, Taylor asks Jim if Myra told him anything, but Jim denies it. On revealing his conversation with Myra regarding her contact in 2149, one day Foster, a member of the Terra Nova security team, approaches a communication outpost. When he opens the door, a Nickoraptor just inside the outpost attacks Foster, killing him instantly. Next, Jim and the security team arrive at the scene to investigate, while others assume that the death was accidental. Jim isn't so sure when he finds extensive scratches and claw marks on the inside of the station's door, indicating that the animal has been trapped inside. In the medical sector, Jim wants Elizabeth to conduct an autopsy on Foster's body, and strangely she finds the blood of a Galasaur, and Nickoraptor's favorite prey, on him. Jim deduces that someone used Galasaur's meat as bait to lure the Nickoraptor into the outpost so it would be there to kill Foster when he arrived. Meanwhile, Malcolm discovers an Ankylosaurus egg near the communications outpost. Upon seeing the egg, Zoe pleads with her mom to make it hatch. Convinced that Foster was murdered, Jim and Lieutenant Alicia begin the investigation. They go to Boylan's bar, a usual hangout spot for Foster and his friends, to gather some information. At the bar, Mark informs them that Foster used to be in a secret relationship with a woman. He adds that Foster kept pictures of the woman on his tag, a digital card that includes all the information of the carrier. After going through Foster's bag, Jim and the lieutenant realized that the tag is missing. When they try to locate it, they discover that the tag is on the move. They realize that it is inside the Nickoraptor that killed Foster. Next, a team of Taylor, Lieutenant Alicia, and Jim tracks down the Nickoraptor and subdues it, successfully removing the tag from its stomach. After viewing the pictures contained on the tag, Jim and the lieutenant find that the woman is Rebecca Milner, a married woman. They question Rebecca at her house, but she initially denies having an affair with Foster. Her husband Howard, however, reveals that Rebecca did indeed have an affair with Foster, and out of jealousy he killed Foster himself. The following day, Taylor announces that he is banishing Howard for his murder. Howard is sent out of the colony with a gun, realizing that he easily confessed to murdering. Jim is still suspicious about whether he was telling the truth or covering for his wife. Jim then tracks down Howard in the woods and tells him he does not believe that he killed Foster after all. Next, he sneaks Howard back into the colony so they can talk with Rebecca. To Howard's surprise, Rebecca states that she did not kill Foster either. In fact, they had broken up a few weeks ago because Foster liked to gamble excessively at Boylan's bar. While researching Foster's financial records, Jim finds that someone had owed Foster a lot of cash. Taylor orders his security team to arrest Boylan for hosting illegal gambling. Although he accepts the part about illegal gambling, he denies killing Foster. The security team searches through the bar for the financial records, but to no avail. Just then Mark informs the team that Boylan has escaped into the jungle. Jim, Taylor and another security member Curran head out to hunt down Boylan. After stopping at a spa, Taylor surprisingly starts questioning Curran on the killing of Foster and then reveals that Boylan had not really escaped. He had actually told them that Curran had a large debt to Foster. Curran tries to defend himself, but when Taylor continues to press him, he pulls his rifle on Jim and Taylor and attempts to fire. Fortunately, Taylor had unloaded it before leaving the colony. The commander then wrestles with Curran for a while, cursing him for killing a fellow soldier. He then banishes Curran on the spot and heads off into the jungle to survive alone. Meanwhile, Josh and Sky follow Boylan's directions to meet with Myra regarding Josh's request. The pair meet the Sixers in the woods, where Myra tells Josh that she can help get his girlfriend Kara from 2149 under one condition: he must agree to follow her undefined tasks sometime in the future when the time comes. Josh hesitatingly agrees and Myra sends them back on their way to the colony. Back in the medical sector, the Ankylosaurus egg finally hatches. Zoe pleads with her parents to keep the baby and they agree to keep it temporarily. Jim, planning to take Zoe to a place called the Eye holographic simulator containing Earth's entire history. Once there, Zoe wants to see the place she was born. Jim commands the simulator to show the place, and after that they also watch roller coasters as per Zoe's demand. Just then a meteor explodes in a nearby forest, causing an electromagnetic pulse burst. It immediately emits a shock wave, causing some minor damage to the compound. Because of the EMP burst, Terra Nova's electricity goes offline. Jim and Zoe are stuck inside the eye when the EMP cuts the room's power. Since the room has electronic doors, the pair is stuck in it. After inspecting the room, Jim finds a small escape route under the simulator through which Zoe can fit. He tells her to go through the route which leads to the door outside and open the door's handle manually. In their camp, one of the Sixers informs Myra about the energy failure of Terra Nova. She takes this as an opportunity and orders her men to get ready to attack the colony. Meanwhile, Zoe makes her way through the tunnel under the simulator and her arrives outside the door and manually unlocks it. Once outside, Jim learns about the situation and orders one of the security members to take Zoe home. Next, Myra and her Sixers bring an Imperasaur to Terra Nova's fence, hoping it can distract them. Taylor and Jim make the dinosaur go away by throwing fire arrows in front of the gate. Taylor notices the dinosaur has something in his back, so he realizes that it's just a distraction to get Myra's mysterious box. Both of them go to the medical lab where the box is kept, only to find that Carter and two other Sixers are stealing it. After a fight with them, Carter manages to run away with the box. Jim follows him, but Carter quickly escapes the colony and finally gives the box to Myra. Myra and Carter then meet a man named Lucas in the jungle to give him the box. Lucas opens the box, which displays some digital graphics that resemble those on the rocks near the waterfall. One fine day, Jim and Taylor go fishing by sea. Jen hooks a large swordfish which nearly pulls him over the cliff. At Terra Nova, Elizabeth tells Maddie that one of Maddie's favorite geologists, Dr. Ken Horton, will be returning to the colony. Later that afternoon, after spending months in the jungle doing research and gathering wildlife specimens, Maddie wants to get an autograph. The doctor arrives and then goes off with Elizabeth and Maddie to get himself checked out medically. Meanwhile, Boylan tells Josh that Myra wants the task to be performed that she previously demanded of him. Myra wants Josh to steal a rare medication out of his mother's lab to help cure a sickness that is occurring at the Sixers camp. Meanwhile, Dr. Horton passes his medical testing but refuses to have a brain scan as he immediately wants to get back to his work. Maddie joins him as an assistant and gets a tour of his lab and newly acquired specimens. She requests the doctor to sign her copy of his book and he gladly signs it. Back at home, Maddie notices that Horton's signature on her book does not match his signature on a letter he wrote to Maddie when she was a child. The following day, Maddie asks some questions to Horton relating to the letter, but he doesn't recall it. He instead asks to see the letter so that he can get a copy, keep it as a souvenir. Maddie, however, finds it weird. Next, Josh demands proof that Mayer can bring Kara to Terra Nova, so Boylan takes him to the Sixers camp. Nira initially is unwilling to provide for Josh's request but eventually provides holographic telepathic communication with Kara. Josh is satisfied and agrees to steal the medicine for her. Back by the sea, Jim and Taylor come across a recently abandoned campfire which Taylor knows to be from Curran, the soldier they exiled for murder. Taylor wants Jim to head back to the colony while he hunts down Curran. At the colony, Dr. Horton shows Maddie how he plans to save decomposing Applefield using some green beetles he brought from the field trip. During their conversation, Maddie notices that the doctor continues to have difficulty recalling his past. Back at home, Josh steals his mother's card so that Boylan can replicate it. After Boylan replicates it, Josh breaks into the lab and attempts to use the card to gain access to the medicine cabinet, but the card fails. He pulls out a pistol given to him by Boylan and fires at the cabinet. Josh is pushed backward, slamming into the wall behind him but successfully opening the cabinet in the process. He then steals all of the indicated medicine. In the meantime, Taylor finds Curran with a badly injured leg in the jungle. Taylor mixes up something for Curran's infected leg but doesn't tell Curran why he is helping him. At Horton's lab, a curious Maddie sneaks in only to find her letter burned and in the trash. Just then Horton returns to the lab, stops using his supporting cane and walks around the lab without limping. Maddie quickly hides under a table. Dr. Horton looks through the bag of the trash containing the pieces of the letter and leaves the lab again, regaining his cane and his limp. Later, Maddie conceives that someone is impersonating Horton and that they surgically altered their face before coming to Terra Nova. She then realizes she should be able to get the real Horton's DNA from the saliva residue on the envelope that the real doctor had licked and sent it to her years ago that she still had, and compare it to the fake Horton's DNA. After assisting Dr. Horton briefly, she grabs his drinking cup and sneaks off to compare the DNA at the lab, but both the DNA matches in the system. However, Dr. Horton is seen secretly watching Maddie compare the DNA. Josh goes to Boylan's bar and tells Boylan that his father had been asking a lot of questions about the break-in at the lab. Boylan decides to frame one of his less desirable customers for the incident. Next, the man is brought in and is high on a particular drug in question, but Jim senses something isn't right. Back in the jungle, Curran is healed with Taylor's mixture. The commander then tells Curran that for him to redeem himself he must find the Sixers and pretend to join them so he can determine who the spy is at Terra Nova that is giving the Sixers information and supplies. Meanwhile, Maddie continues her investigation by visiting the Eye. Using the information there, she deduces that the real doctor must have been killed by his former assistant, who then altered his appearance to look like Dr. Horton. Horton then enters the room and finds out what Maddie has been researching. Thankfully, before the Horton imposter can do anything vile to Maddie, another person enters the room, letting Maddie escape. She then decides to go pick up her sister Zoe from school, only to find out that the impersonator has already taken her. Maddie finds Zoe and the fake Horton in the apple orchard. The impersonator lets Zoe go, but before she can run off, Maddie tells her little sister to inform their father that she'll be late in cooking the asparagus. The impersonator finally reveals that he was Horton's assistant, Andrew Fickett. He explains that the real Dr. Horton was a liar and took credit for others' research. He then ties her to a tree and reveals a jar containing a lethal spider, but before the spider can get to Maddie, Jim arrives and knocks Fickett down. It turns out that Jim had been alerted when Zoe informed him about Maddie's asparagus, which was their code for danger. Safe at home, the rest of the family talks about Maddie's good intuition. Just then Josh walks in and tells them the whole story of his involvement with Boylan and the Sixers and his plan to get Kara to Terra Nova. Jim immediately confronts Boylan, who reveals that Mara does indeed have a way to communicate with 2149 without the time portal being open, but he swears doesn't know how she communicates. Jim brings this news to Taylor, who isn't that surprised. Taylor theorizes that the only one who could be responsible for creating the technology to communicate with 2149 would be his son Lucas, who has been missing from the colony for a long time. It's the same Lucas who Mira met in the jungle to give the mysterious box. At the Sixers camp, Myra watches a dragonfly that has just landed on her hand after spying through Terra Nova. In the colony, Boylan has been arrested after Josh confessed to his business involvement with the Sixers. In a cell, Taylor interrogates him, demanding to know what else he knows or has told the Sixers. Meanwhile, Josh pleads to his father to check on Boylan. In the cell, Jim finds an unconscious Boylan, who tells Jim to go to the Pilgrim's Tree, the largest banyan tree in Terra Nova, and dig under it to find the truth. Jim then searches on a digital map to locate the tree with Malcolm's help and heads out to take a look. After arriving at the tree, Jim begins digging and discovers the skeletal remains of a human. He then talks about it to Elizabeth, who notes that the body is missing its right arm and that the person might have been shot. Jim doesn't want Taylor to know of it yet, as he thinks the commander might have something to do with it. Out in the jungle, a security team including Mark is delivering supplies to an outpost, but they are ambushed by the Sixers and confiscated of all the supplies. Meanwhile, Maddie is directing the practice for a play to be performed in the upcoming Harvest Festival. Zoe is portraying Commander Taylor in the play, which is a story about the history of Terra Nova. While practicing on the stage, the earlier seen dragonfly flies over them and a nearby soldier successfully knocks it down. Maddie is surprised to find the dragonfly carrying a microchip attached to it. Upon further investigation, Malcolm concludes that the dragonfly was being used like a carrier pigeon to send messages back and forth between the Sixers and their spy within the colony. Next, Mark and his team arrive back at the colony and inform Taylor about the ambush. Since Boylan is still in the cell, they deduce that he couldn't be the spy who tipped Myra off regarding the time and location of the supply mission. Therefore, Boylan gets released from the cell. In her lab, Elizabeth finds that the person whose remains were found did not come through any known pilgrimage. Learning this, Jim goes to Boylan's bar to question him regarding the body. Boylan initially denies having a connection with it, but gives in and reveals that Taylor had asked him to help bury the body a few years ago. Meanwhile, Malcolm discovers Elizabeth working on the body and asks why he doesn't know about it. He then goes off to retrieve Taylor. Jim lies that he found the body after receiving an anonymous tip. Surprisingly, Taylor brushes it off, saying it is most likely the body of a Sixer, making Jim and Elizabeth even more suspicious. Malcolm tells Taylor that he has discovered how the Sixers and spy got the dragonfly to do their work. He explains that the dragonfly was following a particular frequency, that it was attracted to. The Sixers knew about this frequency, so they took it as an opportunity. Pleased with the news, Taylor decides to release the dragonfly to track the source of the sound so that it can lead to their spy. Malcolm then releases the dragonfly from its cage, and he and Taylor follow it around the colony, finally tracking it to Jim's house. At the Harvest Festival, Jim and Elizabeth watch Zoe's play, and they notice that one of the characters in the play, General Richard Philbrick, Taylor's commanding officer, only has one arm. But before the couple can check on this newly found information, Taylor arrives at the scene and arrests Jim for being the Sixers' spy. Next, Jim is put in a cell. Taylor walks in and tells him that he'll let him go if Jim stops his investigation of the body found under the pilgrim's tree as a cop. Jim refuses and instead asks Taylor if he killed General Philbrick. Taylor pauses for a while and finally confesses to killing the general, but he only did it so in self-defense. As Taylor explains the past events, the show goes back to a flashback, thus implying Philbrick and Lucas and later the Sixers were trying to get a time portal created that could work in both directions, meaning that people and things could not only come to Terra Nova but they could also go out. Their motive was to extract all of Terra Nova's natural resources and send them to 2149 Earth. His son Lucas was a genius, so he was on the verge of finding his way to create the returning portal, but soon enough the commander discovered his son's work and destroyed it because he didn't want Terra Nova to end up like 2149 in the future. Furious, Lucas ran away from the colony, and when Taylor finally tracked him, he also saw General Philbrick arriving from the future. The general was there to relieve Taylor of command, but when Taylor refused, the general pulled his pistol ready to kill Taylor. In self-defense, Taylor fired a shot, killing the general instantly. Since Taylor couldn't kill his own son, he let him flee into the jungle. After Taylor finishes his story, he and Jim agreed to not let anyone take Terra Nova from them and forever protect the colony and its people. The commander then releases Jim from the cell, knowing he's not the Sixers' spy. Taylor prepares to go into the jungle on his own for a 24-hour quest. As Taylor starts his motorbike, he tells Jim to stay alert as the Sixers' spy is still on the loose because Lieutenant Alicia is away on another mission. Taylor leaves Jim in charge of the colony as temporary commander. Next, Taylor explores the area around the waterfall and finds more of Lucas' equations inscribed in the rocks. Suddenly, Mara appears from behind, pointing a rifle at him. She reveals that Lucas is getting closer every day to creating a two-way time portal between 2149 and Terra Nova. She then ties up Taylor's hands behind his back. At the colony, Jim is informed about a flashing light that another soldier has noticed coming from the jungle. Jim deduces that the light must be the way Sixers communicate with the spy inside the colony. When they notice another flashing light coming from within the colony, they begin searching for the source of the signals. Following the signal, Jim and Mark arrive at an unfinished housing development, but they don't find anyone. Just then Sky's seen hiding from them holding her bleeding palm. Meanwhile, Jim notices a small drop of blood floating on the surface of a glass. In the woods, Myra decides to take Taylor to her camp. During their travel, Myra tells him that the people who hired her want Lucas to create the portal so that they can take Terra Nova's resources to 2149. She must take care of Taylor, in return she would be rewarded. Without Myra's notice, Taylor picks up a sharp thorn that he can use to slowly cut the ropes around his hands. In the lab, Sky sneaks in and retrieves a medical spray and secretly heals her wounded palm. Jin then walks into the lab with a blood sample, hoping that Elizabeth can get DNA from it to reveal the identity of the spy. Myra continues leading Taylor towards her camp, explaining that she is doing it all for her daughter Sienna, so that she can have a better life in 2149. By now Taylor has managed to cut off his ropes, and with a small struggle he gains control of Myra. As Taylor now begins to lead Myra to her rover so that they can go back to the colony. A slasher is seen silently watching them from the cover of a bush without any communication device to talk with the Sixers. Sky joins Josh for some digging out in the jungle, hoping to sneak away to the Sixers camp in the process. In the medical sector, Elizabeth requests Malcolm to look into the blood sample and try to extract DNA from it. Meanwhile, Sky and Josh arrive at the work site, and Sky mentions that she is going to go check in with the foreman since she had tagged along. Instead, she sneaks off and meets up with the Sixers at their vehicle. They arrive at the camp and Sky is taken to a hut where a woman is seen lying on a bed. It is revealed that the woman is Sky's mother, who is suffering from sunstreak fever, the same illness which she supposedly had already died from. Sky brings the intel of Terra Nova to the Sixers, and in return her mother gets treated for her condition. Sky hands over the latest data to one of the Sixers and has a quick visit with her ailing mother before returning to the colony. Back at the lab, Elizabeth tells Jim that getting DNA results from the sample will take overnight to complete, while putting the sample on a small dish. When Sky reports for her evening internship shift at the med sector, she learns that she accidentally left behind a drop of blood at the signal site and that it's being analyzed. Later that night she returns and destroys the blood sample, hoping to eliminate any chance of being outed as the Sixers spy back. In the jungle, Taylor and Mira are followed by the carnivorous dinosaurs. They are forced to jump off a waterfall. After they surface, they realize they're in trouble because the rifles have sunk to the bottom of the water and can't be retrieved despite numerous tries by Taylor. Since they know they won't be able to make it to Terra Nova or Myra's vehicle by then, they decide to stay where they are and make a stand together, fighting the slashers and not each other. Meanwhile, Jim and Elizabeth discover that the blood sample has been destroyed. However, Elizabeth deduces that it could narrow down the list of possible spies, since the person who destroyed the sample has access to the lab. Based on this knowledge, they can create a list of 84 people who fit the criteria, with some disagreements over who has the most and best jungle experience. They make a temporary camp and prepare some weapons. They prepare bows, arrows, spears, and some flammable mixture they plan on using to defend themselves against the slashers. During their conversation, Myra reveals that she was sent to prison for taking part in a rebellious movement before coming to Terra Nova. However, their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of the two slashers. Working together, they manage to repel a slasher with a tar-covered arrow shot by Myra, piercing its side. Taylor then throws a flaming spear into the same area of the dinosaur, causing that area of it to catch fire. Arriving in pain, the slasher retreats and the other backs down and follows the first. Later, the pair agree that maybe they were allies in some parallel universe and affirm that they could have been a hell of a team under different circumstances. The next day they part, not as friends but not quite the enemies they were, and return their separate ways, both wondering how this all will end. Back at the colony, Elizabeth informs Jim and Mark that the analysis of the blood sample wasn't completely vain, as the machine was able to complete enough of the analysis to determine that the blood belonged to a woman. So this narrows the list of people as possible spies from 84 total people with access to the lab to just 47 females. In the meantime, Taylor returns to camp, asking Jim how he liked being a commander. Jim answers that he wouldn't want to do it every day. As Jim walks out of Taylor's office, Sky comes in to greet Taylor after his 24-hour quest in the jungle. They discuss going to the memorial field for Sky's parents' 3rd death anniversary. Taylor notices an odd look on Sky's face, but when asked if something is bothering her, she says no. Next, Taylor and Jim arrive at the terminus, the place where people arrive on Terra Nova from 2149. Since the 11th pilgrimage is only a few days away, Taylor wants to capture the spy before the pilgrims arrive. He puts the terminus on a 24-hour watch. Jim continues his investigation on the spy and interrogates all the suspects within the 47 female lists who had access to the infirmary. When it's Sky's turn, he questions her whereabouts when the Sixers made contact. She claims that she was playing chess with Josh at her house. Jim notices the cuts on Sky's hands. After the interview, Sky quickly finds Josh and asks him to confirm the lies she told his father. When asked why she had to lie, Sky claims she was simply out borrowing some copper tubing to make a new still for their alcohol. Josh is uncomfortable with the idea of lying to his father but agrees since he doesn't believe Sky is the Sixer spy. Next, Sky steals a tape from a communication outpost, retrieves her gun from its hiding place and goes to the Sixers camp to give the week's intel. After giving the intel, she runs to her sick mother. Sky is surprised to find Taylor's son, Lucas, who gave her mother a new blanket. Outside her mother's room, Lucas reveals that he has solved the problem of how to transport people from Terra Nova back to 2149, but there are still some final calculations to be made. Lucas could do them himself, but it would take weeks, and the calculations could be done in the eye and a fraction of the time. He wants Sky to use the computing power in the eye to do this quickly or he'll kill her mother. Back at Terra Nova, Jim learns that there is a possible security breach, a previously overlooked drainage ditch big enough for someone to traverse. Jim orders his team to put a security camera in the area, then he asks Josh about Sky's chess story and Josh covers for her. Meanwhile, Sky goes to the eye and inserts the data chip Luca gave her and runs the formula's calculations. After the calculations are done, she brings the chip back to Lucas, who immediately plugs it in. As complex equations appear on his computer screen, Lucas tells Sky it worked and that his father will get what he deserves. He further tells that he's hated his father ever since August 2138, and if Sky wants to know why, she should ask Taylor herself. Sky asks what will happen when the portal is reversed, and Lucas begins to seem increasingly threatening, explaining that his employers will take over Terra Nova even if it means going to war. Back at the colony, Jim watches footage of Sky re-entering the colony through the drainage ditch. Taylor cannot believe it has been Sky all this time. Jim wants to double check, so he confronts Josh, who admits lying for Sky. Meanwhile, Taylor wants Curran, the banished soldier who's now living with the Sixers, to confirm that Sky is the spy, but then he gets another idea. Taylor calls Sky to play chess with her. During the game, he mentions that he'll be leading a supply convoy through a canyon to Outpost 3. After Sky leaves, Taylor and Jim watch footage of Sky entering the drainage ditch. Taylor expects that the Sixers will attack the convoy and he wants Jim to follow them, ready to counterattack. Next, they ready the ambush for the Sixers, but they never show. Jim theorizes that Sky is only giving them information that wouldn't harm the colony, and perhaps she's only working for them because they have some leverage on her. Back at the Sixers camp, Myra is angry that Sky didn't tell her about the convoy, to which Sky claims that she didn't know. Myra threatens to refuse to give Sky's mother medicine unless she provides better information. After seeing Sky, Lucas grabs her and tells her that he'll be returning to 2149. He also tells her that she shouldn't go back to the colony because his employers are coming from the portal and they'll kill everyone who resists. He is overjoyed at the fact that Taylor will know his son has finally defeated him. After Lucas leaves, Sky tearfully confesses everything to her mother, who didn't know about the spying. However, she doesn't think she can continue it any longer now that she knows what the cost to Terra Nova will be. Sky's mother wants her to tell everything to Taylor and urges her daughter to not come back, as she's been sick for a long time and is now ready to die. After a teary-eyed embrace, Sky leaves her mother and runs off to Terra Nova. In the following scene, Jim and Taylor arrive at the outpost where Sky's been using to sneak to the Sixers camp. Just as they find the holster for her gun, Sky runs into them. They tell Sky they know she's the Sixer spy. Sky explains she did it all for her mother breathlessly. She also tells them about Lucas and his success in finishing the equation for reversing the portal. When Taylor asks why they should believe she ever talked to his son, she mentions Lucas talking about August 2138. A phrase that makes Taylor believe in her. Taylor sends Sky back to Terra Nova and he and Jim head out to the terminus. Meanwhile, Lucas arrives at the terminus using his computer to send a burst of energy to flatten the guards. Then, Taylor and Jim arrive and order him away. Lucas warns that firing their rifles would only destroy the portal, cutting off Terra Nova from the future forever. When Taylor refuses to admit defeat and implores him to think of the innocent people in Terra Nova, Lucas scoffs. Said his father. Lucas tells him the next he sees Taylor he won't be alone and steps through the portal. With a flash of light, Lucas is gone. Back at the colony, Sky is called upon at the infirmary and learns the Curran, Taylor's man in the Sixers camp, brought her mother. Outside the infirmary, Jim mentions that he was surprised that Taylor was letting a murderer like Curran stay in camp. Taylor says that unlike Curran, most people don't get a chance to atone for their mistakes. His own son won't let him. In August 2138, Lucas' mother died because he couldn't save her, and Lucas has never forgiven him. Taylor gave a speech about the forthcoming invasion, which he believes will happen when the 11th pilgrimage arrives. He encourages the residents to make a stand and fight for the second chance they have in Terra Nova. Lucas has arrived in 2149. He is overseeing the preparation of the army he plans to take back to Terra Nova. When his employer Weaver joins him, Weaver worries that their travel during the 11th pilgrimage might be difficult since Hope Plaza, the center where the time portal is located in 2149, will be strictly guarded. Lucas sinisterly assures his superior that they'll get in successfully. Meanwhile, back in Terra Nova, Jim and Taylor are setting up security preparations for Lucas' potential attack. Later at home, Maddie and Zoe are scared about the war. Jim promises to keep them safe and tells Josh that if his girlfriend comes through the 11th pilgrimage, he will get her to the colony safely. The following day, Taylor leaves Lieutenant Alicia as commander in charge while he and Jim go to the terminus to await the arrival of the pilgrimage. Once there, Hope Plaza communicates with Taylor to inform him that they are now sending the pilgrims. While Taylor and his soldiers stay in a defense position, the first person comes through the portal. Soldiers search him, but he appears to be a normal citizen. As more people come through, they are checked, cleared, and sent towards the colony. Eventually, Kara arrives and warmly greets Jim. But just then, a man with a bomb strapped to his chest emerges from the portal and detonates, entering the security forces at the gate and knocking Jim out in the process. In the next scene, Jim wakes up in the infirmary at the colony, mostly unable to hear his attending nurse. Disoriented, Jim stumbles outside only to find that the Terra Nova colony is in ruins. Soldiers who identify themselves as Phoenix Force now occupy the colony, and Lucas, Weaver, and Myra reside in Taylor's office. He tries to ask one of the soldiers about the situation but gets knocked down. Elizabeth ushers him back to the infirmary before the soldier prepares to hit him again. Once back at the infirmary, Elizabeth informs Jim that the explosion took place 3 days ago. Lieutenant Alicia was forced to surrender after 26 colonists were killed. While Taylor is still out in the jungle somewhere, Jim returns home to find the rest of his family safe at home, but he learns that Kara during the explosion and soothes his mourning son. Elizabeth informs him that the soldiers confiscated weapons and enforce a curfew while constantly patrolling the colony. Jim then heads down to Boylan's bar where he meets with Lieutenant Alicia. He tries to end her self-inflicted punishment for surrendering the colony, then reveals that the Phoenix group brought their own time portal gate after the original one was destroyed in the explosion. However, the new one was also half destroyed by dinosaurs, and now the soldiers have enlisted Malcolm to repair it. Jim then confronts Malcolm and questions him why he is working for the Phoenix group. Malcolm angrily tells Jim that he was threatened to do so. When Lucas and Myra arrive in search of Jim, however, Jim and Malcolm outwit them by having Jim pretend he is mentally disturbed and crippled after the explosion. Lucas quickly abandons the hope of using him to find his father, but Myra doesn't seem so sure. The following day, Lucas orders his soldiers to summon Sky. He reminds her about the time she betrayed him and that given their history with Commander Taylor, they should consider themselves brother and sister. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Elizabeth is removing bullets from injured soldiers. When she notices that all the bullets have a number hand engraved on them, she informs Jim of this, and Jim realizes that they are map coordinates sent by Taylor. He then devises a way to sneak out of the colony. Next, Lucas and Weaver prepare to head out in their rovers to determine the status of the extremely valuable meteoric ore found in one of the valleys. Weaver complains about a massive bug biting his arm, but Lucas seems less than interested. When one of the residents, Casey Darwin, distracts Lucas and his men, Jim manages to sneak in one of the rovers. The rovers arrive at the cliff overlooking a valley filled with thousands of tons of meteoric ore. Weaver, quite a greedy man, is anxious to get started with mining the precious material. He then grabs a gun and fires at a brachiosaur despite Lucas' apparent discomfort. Meanwhile, Jim sneaks away from the rover. He then meets Taylor and the other soldiers in the woods and relays news of the bomb, something a young soldier Riley believes she can defuse. Once they've traced the signal to its location, using a tracker, the team races to the spot where the bomb was planted by the Phoenix Force and Riley prepares to disable it. Meanwhile, Weaver spots them on a hill and informs Lucas that his father is disabling the bomb. Lucas demands Weaver to detonate it, but they are still well within the blast zone. Riley disables the bomb and they escape. Jim then makes his way back to the colony pretending to be disoriented and stumbled outside the gate in confusion. The guards bring him to his home and threaten to kill him if he is caught outside the gates again. The following day, Mira is approached by a Phoenix guard who asks her to fulfill the orders of their employers to explore an area known as the Badlands. In Lucas' office, Skye asks if she can speak to him privately. Skye explains that since Taylor still refuses to talk to her about being the Sixers' spy, she will ally herself with Lucas. Over the next few days, Jim manages to attach tracking devices on Phoenix rovers so that Taylor can keep tabs on them. Various soldiers and rovers are taken down in the jungle and Lucas deduces that someone in the colony is helping father. He then heads to Boylan's bar and taunts Josh to draw out his father. When Lucas starts bullying Skye as well, Josh loses his cool and hits Lucas in the face. Lucas then orders his soldiers to hold Josh back and deliver several blows to Josh as well. Skye screaming runs to go fetch Jim. Jim blows his cover by rushing in to defend his son. After fighting off several soldiers, he is eventually overpowered. Lucas, suspecting that Jim is the one helping his father, orders him to be searched and finds a tracking device in the pocket. He then orders both Josh and Jim to be thrown in the cell later. Lucas lets go of Josh after Skye convinces him he gives Jim one more chance to tell him where his father is, but Jim doesn't give him any information. Lucas then pulls a taser to torture Jim until he can inform him about his father's location. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Weaver feels worse after the bug bite. Elizabeth then appears and informs Weaver that he has just been injected with the larvae of parasites and won't provide him the cure until he gets Jim out of the cell. Meanwhile, Jim is under continuous torture from Lucas, but he refuses to break. Jim asks why Lucas hates his father so much. Lucas reveals that back in Somalia, Taylor was forced by rebel invaders to choose the life of his son rather than his wife. Something Lucas believes his father always blamed him for. Moreover, Lucas was forced to watch as his mother was slowly killed in front of him. Weaver then appears and makes up a lie that Taylor's camp has been found. Lucas quickly leaves and Weaver uses this chance to help Jim escape. Weaver then brings Jim home and Elizabeth injects the cure into Weaver, only to reveal that she had lied about his injected parasites. The cure was in fact a sedative and Weaver slowly falls unconscious. The family then begins to make their escape to join Taylor in the woods. Meanwhile, Lucas realizes that the story of finding Taylor's camp was a lie and that Jim and his family have escaped. As the soldiers searching everywhere for them, Jim and the family hide behind large tanks on the outskirts of the colony and wait for Lieutenant Alicia. She arrives and tells them that she has to stay behind to aid in their escape. She then leaves, promptly exploding a building and distracting the guards. The family then escapes the colony and meet Taylor just outside the colony. Unfortunately, the lieutenant is caught by the guards and brought before Lucas, who shoots her dead in front of everyone when she refuses to give up Taylor's location or Jim's. Taylor and the rest arrive at the temporary camp. Natty reunites with Mark and the two embrace each other with a kiss. The following day, Myra returns Terra Nova from her mission in the Badlands and Lucas and Weaver are elated to see an artifact she managed to bring back with her. Back at the camp, Jim and Taylor plan to destroy the Hope Plaza to prevent any more of the Phoenix Group soldiers from coming through the portal and destroying the land. They realize that the portal must be destroyed for good, even if it means cutting themselves off from 2149. As the new portal terminus is complete with the help of Malcolm, the Phoenix soldiers ready their 3 shipments of meteoric ore through to the employers in 2149. Lucas plans to drive a 4th shipment as well, which contains the mysterious artifact. Skye offers to go with him as she claims to know Taylor's location and Lucas accepts. Back in the camp, Jen volunteers to go through the portal to destroy Hope Plaza. Elizabeth gives Jim, in addition to the bomb that he would use to destroy the portal, a special syringe for an unknown purpose. As Lucas drives the mystery shipment, Sky tells him that she knows how he can defeat his father. Lucas stops his vehicle and radios the soldiers at the terminus that he will return to the colony and sends someone else to deliver his cargo. Just then Mark and a fellow soldier dressed as Phoenix soldiers arrive at the scene and hold Lucas hostage. They then swap out Lucas' shipment with one of their own containing Jim. With Mark and Dunham gone with the shipment, Lucas breaks free of the bondage, keeping his hands tied, and knocks Sky out before fleeing on foot towards the terminus. After regaining her consciousness, Sky informs Taylor about the situation. Taylor then heads out to find his son next to the shipment, which has been replaced by a crate with Jim, and it arrives at the terminus and gets pushed through 2149. Weaver follows behind with 3 other shipments of meteoric ore. In the meantime, Lucas races through the jungle towards the terminus but is knocked over by Taylor. After a fistfight, Taylor throws his son to the ground. Lucas begs for his father to help him and begins to apologize for his deeds. He then gets up and embraces his father. Taylor realizes he is his son after all and hugs him back. Suddenly Lucas pierces a knife through his father's stomach. He then prepares to finish Taylor off with another stab but is shot in the chest by Sky, who appears from behind a bush. Next, Jim, hiding in one of the containers, arrives in 2149 in Hope Plaza. Outside the container, Weaver proudly declares the shipments he has brought to his business partners. He then tells them about something valuable they found in the Badlands and opens the container. Jim then slides to the back of the container, grabs a syringe Elizabeth had given to him and injects it into a concealed object in the container with him. As the container door opens, a recently awoken Carnotaurus stumbles outside and attacks Weaver and the employers. Jim then heads away to plant the bomb in the Hope Plaza. He successfully plants the bomb while fighting several soldiers along the way. Back in the jungle, Sky dresses Taylor's wounds and apologizes to Lucas, but when they look for him, Lucas is gone. He apparently lived and has now escaped in the Hope Plaza. Jim prepares to run back to the terminus, but Weaver appears on the way and holds a pistol to his head. Unknown to him, the Carnotaurus comes up behind Weaver and rips him apart. The dinosaur then chases after Jim as he barely makes it through the portal before it is destroyed. With Malcolm's help, Jim appears somewhere else in the woods rather than in the terminus site to avoid Phoenix soldiers there. Elizabeth manages to find him and the two kiss each other, elated for their successful mission. Meanwhile, Myra arrives at the terminus site and learns that Hope Plaza was destroyed and they are stuck in the past that is in Terra Nova itself. A grief-stricken and enraged Myra stands there in shock, realizing she will never get to see her daughter again. Jim and Elizabeth reunite with Taylor in the camp when the commander gets a call from Boylan. The bartender informs him that the Phoenix group suddenly left Terra Nova and headed north without mentioning to anyone where they were going. Kayla and the group then head back to Terra Nova, where they are happily greeted by the residents. As they all begin the process of repairing the colony, Mark informs Taylor and Jim that their northernmost patrol spotted the Phoenix group heading towards the Badlands. Jim recalls Weaver and other employers talking about the Badlands, and the container they switched out contained something the Phoenix soldiers recovered in the Badlands. Taylor then has the container brought in. Once the container is opened, everyone is shocked to find a prow of an 18th century ship. Jim wonders why and how the remains of an 18th century ship ended up in the Badlands. In this time period, Taylor contemplates what in the Badlands could be so important to Phoenix soldiers and what else is out there waiting to be discovered. Later that night, Jim and Elizabeth join their children to watch a meteor shower together. That was all of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Click the like button and subscribe to watch more videos like this, and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.